You guys excited to be here? Good. We're starting off, like Matt was saying, we're starting off a brand new sermon series today on the book of James called Practically Christian. Practically Christian. And the reason why we called it this is James is one of those books in the Bible that a lot of people have called the Bible in a nutshell. James is one of the writers that I would have really liked to have met because he's so practical and he can just break things down to where he's showing you in these few chapters what it looks like to be a Christian. The book of James is not necessarily about how someone becomes a Christian. It's a book about how people, Christians, learn to behave as a Christian. And that's very important because a lot of Christians in today's world, they believe that Jesus is the Son of God, but they're not really studying Scripture enough to really see what it looks like to practically walk out our Christian faith. And the book of James does that. So we're going to take a chapter a week, my dad and I, for the next few weeks, and we're going to break down this book. So I highly encourage you, go on Right Now Media, the gift we gave you guys a few weeks ago. Look at some other sermon series on Right Now Media, some tools, and just study the book of James through the week as we go through this sermon series. And I think you'll really enjoy it. So James, who is James? There's actually 5 James that are recorded in the New Testament. And this James, though, is James, the brother of Jesus. James, the brother of Jesus. I think it's important to note that I think it's an interesting fact that Jesus' brothers actually had a pretty hard time with accepting the fact that Jesus was the Son of God early on. And you can imagine your brother or sister at 9 years old being like, "Hey, I'm God." I'd be like, "Get out of here, you idiot." You're not God, Can you imagine being raised with Jesus? I mean, you're always the other brother or the other brother. And there's the Son of God, can't do anything wrong, literally. And but that would be hard, right? But James is the brother of Jesus. And it's very specific. In one of the Gospels, it shows us that after Jesus resurrected, he appeared and had a conversation with James. And in that moment, James had already believed, but in that moment, it was a deep revelation that this is my brother, yes, but this is also not my brother because this is my God. Because he died on a cross for my sins, and now the resurrected Jesus is standing in front of me. James, as he writes the book of James, is actually a prominent church leader in Jerusalem. So if you remember in the book of Acts, Christianity starts in Jerusalem. They're in an upper room. The Holy Spirit comes in. Jews were really some of the first ones to convert to Christianity, and they needed a prominent, trusted church leader to lead the church of Jerusalem, and James was one of those. So we're going to start in James chapter 1, in verse 1, and the very first verse shows a lot about the character of this man. And it says this in verse 1, "James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ." So he's writing about himself, and he's writing this book, and he says, "I'm James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ." Again, I hit on the fact that he was his brother. If James was like me, or let's be honest, like you, we would be real tempted to be proud that I'm not just one of the disciples of Jesus. I'm not one of those other followers. I'm his brother. If you're James or if I'm James, let's be honest, I probably would have liked to have started off this book by saying, James, the brother of Jesus. Then when people read it, they would be like, oh, this is the brother of Jesus. Not just one of the disciples of Jesus. I mean, we really need to pay attention, but he doesn't. He's so strategic, and it reveals his humility, and it reveals how deeply he actually believed Jesus was and is the Son of God. Because he says, I'm James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. That takes a lot of humility for someone to open up a book like this when he's the brother of the Son of God. Continues, "To the 12 tribes scattered among the nations, greetings." Greetings. Verse 2, "Consider it pure joy." This is the most famous part of chapter 1. "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Not lacking anything. So I titled week 1, The Truth About Trials. The Truth About trials. How many of you guys have been through a trial recently? Let's just be honest. I mean, it should be almost everybody. You're like, a trial. Everybody goes through trials. Everybody. And if you're not in one now, then you probably just came out of one. And if you didn't just come out of one and you're not in one now, I don't want to be a pessimist or anything, but one might be around the corner. Why? Because we live in a fallen world, a broken world that one day Jesus is going to come back to fully restore. But in the meantime, it's broken. It's broken and sinful. People are sinful. The world brings trials to our doorstep. And the book of James in chapter 1, it's important to know that there's two different kinds of trials, and James is talking about one and not the other. There's the trials that we make, which are the ones that we make out of our own kind of dumb decisions and sinful decisions, and then we'll make these decisions, and then there's a trial, and we're like, God, save me from the trial. And he's like, you're probably going to have to work your way out of this one, but I'll equip you because you decided your way into it, so you might need to decide your way out of it. But there's also the trials, though. There's the trials we make, but there's also the trials we meet. The trials we meet are the ones where we're just living our everyday life, and out of nowhere, something comes and it changes the course of our day. It changes the course of our life. These are the trials that James is talking about. Because we live in a sin-cursed world, there's just going to be trials that come. They're going to come your way. But the key to all of this, and the key to understanding how to have pure joy, consider it joy when you go through trials. I don't know about you, but joy and happiness are not the first emotions I feel when a trial comes. When a trial first comes, I don't throw my hands up in the air and say, thank you, God, for this awful thing. I mean, am I the only one? I don't necessarily do that. But James says that joy is attainable. Consider it joy when you face trials of many kinds. And the key to finding joy in verse 2 actually lies in verse 3. And it says this, because you know that the testing of your faith, because you know there's something that we're supposed to know that will allow us to consider and to process a trial, and where the outcome of it is that we can have joy and have a foundation under our feet when trials come our way. What is the thing we need to know? What do you know about God that is so true and so sustainable, that it's eternal and everlasting? So when that things come and they come into your life and they leave your life and tragedies and trials come, what is the thing you know about God to be so true that you can hang on to it when trials come and you can actually consider it joy because you know the outcome will be you being closer to God? What do we have to know? Because here's the key. What you know determines what you believe, right? The truth you know determines what you believe. Not what you say you believe, what you actually believe. So truth, what you believe to be true, determines what you believe, and what you believe determines how you behave or how you react or respond to everything in your life. It all goes back to what you believe to actually be true. And this is one of the biggest hang-ups that the world has when they look at Christians, is we say, Jesus is truth. The Word of God is truth. I actually believe that. But our responses and behaviors aren't lining up to what we say we believe, because what we actually believe to be true isn't this. That's where this gets a little bit tricky. What do you actually believe to be true? Because how we respond to all of those things in life really goes back to that. So we're going to go through 7 things today. Do not be afraid. We'll just be about an hour and a half. 7 things today. That was a joke if you're new. 7 truths. You guys actually believe me? That's sad because that means I preach really long every time. Okay, so anyways, 7 truths about trials. Because until you know what is true, until you know what's really true, you can't apply it to your trial. And if you can't apply it to your trial, you're not going to be able to consider it pure joy. The first truth about trials is this: trials are inevitable. I hit on this a little bit, but they're inevitable. James 1 in verse 2 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters. It doesn't say if you face trials. What does it say? Whenever you face trials. It's not an if. It's a when. He's saying, guys, don't be surprised. When you become a Christian, your problems don't go away. And if you've been a Christian longer than a minute, you know that to be true. Because God doesn't zap us to heaven the moment we get saved. We get saved, and guess what world you walk right back into? The world you just came from. You walk right back into the same world, the same problems, the same people, but now after we get saved, we are equipped and empowered by the Holy Spirit to respond and to see things differently. But what he's saying is whenever you face trials of many kinds, whenever. And what's sad is almost everything in our life, it's inevitable, trials are coming, but what almost everything in our life, in our culture, TV ads, stuff online, stuff on social media, everything's trying to get us to run from trials and be in denial of trials. Have you ever noticed that? Every credit card advertisement is run from your problems. Get this credit card and go on vacation. And then you know that when you get back from vacation, you just created a new giant debt problem, right? It's when you're on Facebook and everything you see is all of your friends going to tropical this and Europe that, and they're leaving and you're bored at work. All of social media is screaming at you, run from your trial. Escape because all these other people are happy. There's everything in our life is trying to convince us to run from the inevitable. But if it's inevitable, why are we training our response to be running? If these trials, if we can all agree that they're inevitable, we can't run from them. We have to learn to navigate through them. Everyone goes through trials. Everyone. Every person you go and see on social media that we find ourselves being jealous of, every person sitting to your right and your left, and they look like they have it all together, they don't. And neither do you. And one of Satan's greatest tactics is trying to isolate you and to get you in your own dark corner of believing that you have the worst problems, you have the greatest amount of loneliness, you are the most depressed, you are the most anxious, you have the least amount of money, you have the most relational problems, and he isolates you just like lions isolate a gazelle by themselves, because once it's away from the herd, death. Once Satan can get you away from the herd, the church, once he can get you away from the people that can actually come around you and help you, then he has you right where he wants you. He's trying to isolate you and make you believe that trials aren't inevitable. You're the only one going through them, and it's not true. The second truth about trials is this: trials are diverse. Trials are diverse. They come from everywhere, and they look like everything. James 1 and verse 2 again, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of what? Many kinds. Can I get an amen to that? Many kinds. There's not just one trial that you deal with your whole life. There might be one, but there's also 10 others. So trials are diverse. They come from everywhere. When you look at the original language here, this trials of many kinds, those two words, many kinds, when you look in the original Greek, the word purely translates into multicolored or vast, various. But I love that phrase multicolored because it shows you this array, this multifaceted illustration of all of these trials that look like everything. They're all different shapes and sizes, and they're all different degrees of pain. And I love that the Greek word there is multicolored. And there's another place in the New Testament, and I think this is fascinating. Fascinating. The same Greek word, multicolored, okay, also appears in 1 Peter 4:10. And when we think about our problems being multicolored, I just listed a few. There are relational problems, financial problems, mental illness problems. We have problems, job loss problems, school problems. Every problem and trial we can imagine, they're multicolored. But in 1 Peter 4:10, Peter's writing, and he says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So in English, it's many kinds, and in James, it's many kinds, and right here in Peter, it's various forms, but it's the same Greek word that means multicolored. I think God in His sovereignty and His love for us is showing us something here. No matter how vast and multicolored and multifaceted your trials are, no matter how unique your trials are, God's grace is just as unique and multifaceted. For every trial, there's a grace to get us through it. In James, he's writing how all these trials are coming. And then in Peter, it says, well, look at the vastness of God's grace. And if you're a believer and you've gone through trials, I love the luxury of hindsight because we can look back at every single trial we've gone through and you can see that God's grace came in and matched the trial. You were able to walk through something you actually believed you could not survive through. I didn't know I was going to make it. I didn't think I could make it. But guess what? You made it. And you're here. You're sitting here hearing about the goodness of God. Trials are diverse, but so is God's grace. Number 3, trials are unexpected. They're unexpected. This is huge. Again, James 1:2, there's this phrase, whenever you face trials of many kinds, that word face means falling into or fell into. When he's talking about how you face a trial, what he's saying is you fall into a trial. When you find yourself falling into one of these trials, remember the trial you meet versus the trial you make? He's saying, you know those trials you meet and you weren't expecting them and you weren't wanting them, you didn't plan for them, and then bam, it came out of nowhere. It's the same Greek word used in the Good Samaritan story when the man was traveling and it said he fell into the hands of thieves. He fell among thieves. That man, as he was traveling in the Good Samaritan story, was not expected to be jumped and beaten and left for dead, but it happened to him. He fell among thieves. And James uses the same word when we find ourselves falling among trials. They're unexpected, and they come from nowhere. This last week, our family went through a trial. Mandy and I were actually out of town, and we heard that Delaney, my sister-in-law, Delaney and Brandon are our student pastors, and we heard that Delaney was going to be induced Friday morning. The doctor wanted to go ahead and induce her. It wasn't quite to her due date yet, but they wanted to do that. But a couple of days before that, Mandy and I were out of town, and we were in a hotel room getting ready to go for dinner, and all of a sudden the phone rings, and we had heard that Delaney was taken, maybe we thought to the hospital, and we just knew, okay, well maybe the baby didn't want to wait to be induced. The baby's just coming. My mom calls me, and she is just frantic on the phone. I could barely understand her, and she was just saying, Dustin, Denise, who is Delaney's mom, Denise and I just got removed from the room. The doctors came in. There's something wrong with the placenta. There's something going on. It was broken. The baby hasn't been getting air. They don't know about Delaney. They don't know about the baby, and she is just frantic. And she said, Dustin, Mandy, stop what you're doing and pray. And the last thing that I heard from my mom was saying they didn't know how long the baby was without oxygen, and they didn't know the status of Delaney. And so I set my phone down in our hotel room, and Mandy went out onto the deck, and I got on my knees right there at the little couch area in our hotel room, and I just started praying. Because out of nowhere, about to go to dinner on a trip, about to go into here, they were going into the hospital, perfect 9-month pregnancy. Perfect for Delaney. And at the last moment, there was a severe problem that happened, and I think it's awesome to report to you today that Delaney and the baby are more than fine, and the baby went home yesterday. Carson Leon Woodward, and I think it's awesome because Leon means lion, and so I think it's cool that a lion obviously is going to come into the world fighting, and a beautiful little baby boy. A lot of things could have gone even more severely wrong than what they did, and as I'm writing this message while we were on the trip, about how trials can come out of nowhere, this story just proves it. We have no idea. We are not guaranteed tomorrow. We're not guaranteed this afternoon. We don't know what's in our future. All we know is right now I can be the best prepared and equipped to handle whatever may come my way. That's the response that Christians are meant to have. Yes, we're going to feel emotion. Yes, we're going to be scared. Yes, there's going to be anxiety. Yes, there's going to be fear. But at the end of all those things, there's a comma and a but. God is going to sustain us. Number 4, trials are for testing. Trials are for testing. Out of all 7 points, this is the one that's going to be the hardest one for us to swallow. This is that tough pill. Because nobody likes the idea that God would test us. Honestly, I've preached on this passage over the years, and early on, I tried to look at theologians in the original language and trying to study all this, going, surely, there's got to be another opinion. Maybe this isn't really God testing us. no, after all these years of studying, no one has a varying opinion. It's God testing us. But I want to be clear. It's not God tempting us. God said He'll never tempt us, and He doesn't stop there. He'll never allow temptation in our lives greater than what we can handle. But the Bible tells us explicitly in James that God tests us. It doesn't mean that He causes bad things in your life, but it does mean that He allows them. And through those moments of Him allowing them in His sovereignty, a test is there. And again, I don't love that. You may not like that, but it's so amazing as we learn what this test is that it makes me love God even more. Because verse 3 of James 1 says, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. The testing of your faith. What is this word faith? Faith here in this context is not faith in the context of I have enough faith because I believe strongly enough that something good's going to happen. That's not that faith. The word faith here is actually defining our whole Christian experience. When people come up to you and say, what kind of faith are you? You don't say big. I got big faith. You say, I'm a Christian. And that's what this means. The testing of your Christianity is what develops perseverance. It shows you whether or not you actually get what Jesus did on the cross. Has your life actually been changed? Because when trials come, the true us leaps out. Let's just be honest. The true us leaps out in trials. And again, I'm not saying that a real Christian doesn't have emotions or doesn't feel things. Even the prophets in the Old Testament got mad at God. But at the end of the day, the real us comes out in trials. So what does he mean, this testing, the testing of your faith? Here's what testing produces, and I'm going to give you an example from my life in a second. It produces trust in God, because in hindsight, we all love the luxury of hindsight. Looking back on our trials, here's what they produced if you handled them well. Trust in God, a more authentic you, and the ability to grow. Trust in God, authenticity, and growth. Every single time. But we as humans, when the next trial comes, our innate human response is, why, God? You're bad, God. I'm angry, God. But then when we look back, every single trial we've gone through, it's produced trust in God, authenticity, and growth. But when the next one comes, our default mode as humans is, why? There's no good in this. I do the same thing, guys. There's no good. But then God's like, when are they going to get this? So in my life, and some of you have heard this story a lot before, so I'm not going to go into extreme detail with it, but the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I was at a church camp, and God called me to full-time ministry in an altar call. When we came to the front at the end of service that night, I responded to the preacher saying, if you don't know what God's called you to do, come forward and I want to pray with you. And I felt like God called me to full-time ministry as a 16-year-old going into my junior year of high school. I went into my junior year, I had never had anxiety, never had deep fear, never had depression, none of that stuff. I loved talking in front of people, I loved getting up in front of the class, I liked reading out loud. Those things were never things that I was afraid of, ever. My first period class, my junior year of the first day, I walk in, first class. The teacher hands out the syllabus all over the desk, and we're taking turns going through the class, reading each paragraph out loud. I was always that guy who tried to figure out what paragraph I was going to read and then like halfway memorize it so I would look like a better reader. Anybody else? So it was finally getting to me, and I guessed the right paragraph, and I'm like, sweet, I got this. I'm so smart. I start reading, and for the first time in my life, a panic attack, a severe anxiety attack hit me. I broke out into a cold sweat, thought I was going to pass out. Blood pressure went through the roof, and in that moment, in a split second, I almost felt, the only way I can describe it is that darkness crawled on top of me. And those of you who experienced something like that hopefully that wording maybe connects with you, because it wasn't gradual. In my first breath, in the first sentence I was reading, it was like a spiritual attack. Something came on me and gripped me with fear. It became a battle that I would face for the next 2 to 3 years. My senior year of high school, I lost 15 to 17 pounds. I wasn't eating. I was isolating myself from friends and people. The very thing God called me to do, preach, now became my worst nightmare, and I was deciding to avoid it at all costs. I was getting Fs in my speech class because I wasn't showing up to give speeches. I wasn't doing any homework that had anything to do with talking out loud. And Satan was coming after me. It was a trial I didn't make. It was a trial I met. But we ended up battling through that for 2 to 3 years. When I say we, me and my parents. And back then, any kind of doctor for depression, anxiety was a little bit too taboo in the church world. We had never thought of it. So my parents did what they did, the best they could, and partnered with me, prayed with me, stuck with me. And it did not break until a preaching class, my freshman year of college, a preaching lab class. I preached a sermon, and it was so bad that the class wrote on note cards, give you comments on your sermon, and 3 or 4 of my classmates told me I probably need to find a different occupation. And I went back to my dorm room and I just cried. And on the other line, I'm still getting emotional about it all these years later, on the other line was my dad, and I called him. And we had fought in prayer. Fought. And that was the first real sermon I had preached since all of that fear stuff. And my dad on the other line just softly just said, God, we're so through with this. Just break it. And just with that whisper of just pure belief, it was broken in that moment. And when I came out of that season, I look back on it now, and guess what it produced in my life? Trust in God, authenticity, and growth. Until that point, I could rely on my own talent. Until that point, I didn't know my true self. I didn't know who I was in God. And I had never gone through anything in my life that was a trial to date, truly, until that moment. I didn't know what it meant to rely on God. Nothing. But now I know every single time before I get up and preach, I was sitting there on the front row while Matt was talking, and that panic feeling comes to me every single time. I have preached over 1,000 sermons in the last 10 years, and I have never had one time before I come on stage where a panic attack starts to try to creep on me. And I say, no, God. I know what it feels like to depend on you and to trust you. It can't be me on that stage, or I will have an anxiety attack and I will walk off. And I learned what it means to lean on Him, and I've grown from it. Number 5. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. The 5th truth is trials develop perseverance. Trials develop perseverance. Again, in verse 3, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Perseverance, again, in the original language, just means perseverance. So sorry. But it just means perseverance. It means to hold on. Hang in there. Stick with it. I've gone through so much in my life that now when things come, I'm just like, oh, whatever. Have you ever gone through so much, when something else happens, you're like, all right, pass the donut. I don't know what else to do. Because you've gone through so much and you've seen God be faithful. I don't have enough energy to freak out. Because there's no use. I freak out, I fall apart, and then God comes through. And that's the cycle. But perseverance allows us to never let go. It allows us not to leave a church when people say something weird to you or dumb to you. I don't get offended. I persevere. I persevere when other people in my family are mean or this. I persevere when I feel like God isn't there. I persevere when bad things are happening, when I lose my job. I persevere. It's the ability to hold on because your whole life has been training for it. You're able to go through things you didn't think you could go through. I don't know about you, and I don't even know how I feel about it because I get grossed out with blood and everything, but I watch MMA fights every once in a while at a friend's house, and I get really into it. I'm like, kill him! Wait, I'm a pastor. I can't do that. Okay, so I'm like, but I watch what they go through. I'm watching what they go through, and I'm thinking, if I was in that ring, I would just run and jump over the fence and run as fast as I could the other way. One punch, and I'd be dead. I'd be like, what? Tap! Because I have no training. I could not persevere in that ring. But you watch what they go through, and the only reason they persevere is because of all the training and all the previous fights that they've been through. When someone punches them, they go, bring on another one. And I'm like, I would be running and crying. And they're like, hit me again. I'm like, what? No. But that's how it's like in our spiritual faith. In our spiritual walk, Satan comes at you and hits you with another trial, or the world comes and another trial comes, and now we have the ability to go, that was it? Hit me again. Because I've seen the faithfulness of God. I've seen what God can do in my trials, and I will not give up. I will persevere because I can overcome. I can overcome. Number 6, the sixth truth is trials need to be responded to correctly. Trials need to be responded to correctly. Because it's not just the fact we go through trials that makes us stronger, or everybody in the world will be really strong spiritually. It's how we respond to them. Remember at the beginning I said what we believe to be true determines truth determines what we believe determines how we behave and respond. How we respond is everything. James 1:4 now says this, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature, complete, not lacking anything. The very first word of verse 4 is huge. Isn't it so crazy that the word let has so many spiritual implications? What does let mean? When James is talking to believers and he says, let this happen, what he's implying is you have a choice. You have the power to decide whether or not you will let this play out. Whether or not you will let this happen to where you can actually grow. If you want to let this finish its work. Do you want to grow or do you not? Do you want to grow through trials or do you want to just go through trials? Because what this implies with that word let is let it happen. If you let this happen and it finish its work, you will grow. You will grow. Now, it doesn't mean just taking a back seat to everything and just becoming a punching bag. Yeah, there's times where we've got to just get up and fight, but sometimes the greatest fight is to let this finish its work. Let perseverance finish. Our response is everything. Our response is everything. There's 4 things to remember with our responses that I'm just going to read. 4 things. And these are really great. You could pull them out in the next trial, and these could really help you to remember, okay? And it helps us with our response. The first thing is this. I am here by God's permission. Now that's a little bit tough, and some of you might go, I don't like that. I don't want to remember that part. It gives me immense peace when you have the right perspective. What does it mean when I say everything in this world happens by God's permission? It means that ultimately He's in charge, and ultimately all of His promises will come to pass. Ultimately, when I read this and it says, I am here by God's permission, and all of Scripture validates that. It's not necessarily that God causes it, but it's happening with His permission. It means that I'm right in the palm of His hand, and His eyes are on me. He hasn't forsaken me. He's watching. And we might go, man, a God would just do that? He would just do that? If you're a parent, has your kid ever been in a situation where they go through something, where they're just like, in math homework, like, I don't get it. And you want to go over there and just do it for them. But the best thing you can do is just say, endure. Or something happens and you want to just jump in, but you know they're not going to learn how to be mature if I keep doing everything for them. Your eyes are on them, but you're just saying, grow through this. Second thing, I'm always under His care. His loving grace is always step in step with us. He's always walking right by me and right by you. The third thing, I am in His training. You're in His training. If you work out, have you ever been at the gym where you have one more rep to do and you honestly feel like you're going to die? Like, I'm going to die. And then you go through, I'm like, I'm so dramatic. That's what this is. The reason why you can do one more rep is you understand the pain is for training. Number 4, it will not last forever. It's one of the greatest things I've learned from my dad when my personality is very different than my dad and my wife kind of have the same personality. I freak out. Something bad happens, I'm like, I'm like running around the house. We're all going to die. Mandy's like, oh, the drama, My dad and Mandy are kind of the same. It's like, come what may. They're calm, collected. Mandy's spiritual gift is the gift of faith. One of the greatest things I've learned from my dad, though, when trials come and I'm freaking out and I call him, he just goes, oh, Dustin, it'll pass. God's got it all under control. Do the right thing. Be with your kids. Be with your wife. God has it under control. This too shall pass. And the last truth about trials is trials responded to correctly are always fruitful. are always fruitful. James 1:4 finishes by saying, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Not lacking anything. He tells us what the fruit is. Spiritual maturity, completeness in Christ, and godly perspective. Why do I say godly perspective rather than not lacking anything? Because James is not literally saying you won't lack anything. Because we're still going to have things we want, and we're not going to always have every little thing I think I need. But what he's saying is it's a matter of perspective. Think about the trials you've gone through, and you came through stronger and more spiritually mature. Every single time we come through a trial and the dust settles, all of the frivolous things and all of those material things that we thought we needed during the trial, and when you come through it, here's what you do when you grow spiritually and you start maturing through trials. You get through the trial, and every single trial is like a filter, and you just get rid of the filth and the things you don't need. And what it's doing is it's bringing you more to completeness in Christ, where you get through the trial and you actually mean it when you say, Jesus is now all I need. Isn't that amazing? That's what trials produce. And then every time a trial comes, we want to run. But if we endure it and grow through it and don't just go through it, at the end of it, we just take a big, deep breath of fresh air and go, Jesus is all I need. I don't need anything else to make me happy. He's all I need. He's all I need. In those moments is where people have maybe in the past said a prayer to invite Jesus in their heart, but in those moments is where the revelation of the cross actually sinks deep. Where I look at the cross and I go, Jesus, you did that for me? It's not just a prayer. Wait, my sin, and wait, and you start to get it, that he took my place on the cross. When Jesus is all you need, then he's all you get. And you get it. And you have the revelation. And then once you have the real revelation of who Jesus is, your perspective forever changes. I don't lack anything. I have everything I need. I'm growing in spiritual maturity. I'm becoming more complete in Christ. The next time a trial comes, yes, there's emotion. I'm sad. I'm a little bit anxious. I'm a little bit fearful. But now the trial comes, and other people are freaking out, and you're able to say, hold on, trust me. I've been through something like this. Keep your head up. Don't run from church. Don't run from godly people. Don't run. Don't run. Endure. Persevere. And watch the miracle God is about to do in your life. And all of you would agree, if you're a believer, looking back on your most serious trial, and some of you might be in the middle of one right now, but if you've come through a very serious trial and you grew through it, would you change it? 99% of you would say no. Isn't that astonishing? When we look back and we go, that was the deepest hurt I have ever felt in my life. But wait a minute. I wouldn't even do it differently. Why do we have a tendency to think that? It's because of everything I just preached. Because God never left you. He never walked away. He was with you and you grew. And the reason you don't want to change it is the person you are today is because of it. That's why. That's why. So today, you can give God a hand clap to that. So today, in a second, we're going to sing a final song, and we're going to take communion. So we're way ahead of schedule. I'm going to ask that you not leave, because this is a very important thing. I'm ending talking about the cross, about Jesus. And communion is about remembering, and that's what we're going to do. But guys, the beginning of this series, and we're going to go through several things. The next few weeks, we're going to talk about faith and works, and what's the balance there, and a lot of different things in this series that'll be fun. But today is heavy, and it's serious, and I want to take it very seriously. So if you would bow your heads and close your eyes. Today, I just want to pray with you. I'm not going to call anybody out, have you stand just right where you're at. If you're going through a trial right now, I just want to pray with you. I don't want to breeze by this. If you're going through something and you say, I can't do this alone, pray for me. That's the beauty of your church family. We come together where two or more are gathered in his name. He is in their midst. God is here right now. You're in his hand. His eyes are on you. He's caring for you. But I want to pray that you would have a revelation that you're in his hand, that he is caring for you, and that you can have a faith and a confidence that you didn't have when you walked in. If that's you and you want prayer this morning, would you just raise your hand right where you're at? Wow, so many hands. So many hands. I'm going to pray, and if you raise your hand, just pray with me, and let's just leave differently than we came in, mainly our perspective. Mainly our perspective. Father, we thank you for today and this truth from your word of God. I just pray for every person that raised their hand. You see all the pain and the details of what they're going through. Some of the people in this room, the hurt and the pain is so real. People are battling today, God, fighting for their lives. And the good news is we know that your loving gaze is upon us. You're walking with us right now. You're walking with us. Reveal it to us even more. Let my perspective be broadened. Let my perspective change right now to where I know that if I just persevere and let this perseverance finish its work, the outcome will be growth. We know, God, that you're not going to leave us. You're not going to forsake us. Be with us. We believe it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.